Welcome to The Explainer. Today we are diving deep into the bloody evolution of women in horror. We're going to go from the classic damsel in distress all the way to the one holding the knife. So think about horror for a second. For decades, it feels like women really only got two choices, right? You're either the victim, screaming for help, or you're the monster lurking in the shadows. But here's the thing. Those roles didn't just pop up randomly. They actually tell us a lot about our culture's ideas about gender and power. And to really get a handle on this, we've got to start with a fundamental question. How are we taught to look at things, especially in movies? It all kicks off with this one classic film theory that honestly changed the game.
Okay, so back in 1975, a film scholar named Laura Mulvey came up with this huge idea called the male gaze. Basically, she argued that most movies are designed to show us the world through the eyes of a straight man. And what that does is it turns women on screen into objects, something to be looked at, instead of characters who are actually doing things.
And she said this gaze works in three different ways, all at once. First, there's the camera's perspective itself. Then, there's us, the audience, who are sort of encouraged to see things from the male hero's point of view. And finally, you've got the male characters in the movie who are literally doing the looking. All three of these layers work together to box the female character into being this passive object.
Mulvey put it perfectly. She said this creates a major split. Men get to be active. They drive the story. They're the ones doing. But women, they're just there to be looked at. Their job is simply to appear on screen.
Okay, so that's the passive woman. But what about when she's not passive? What happens when a woman actually has power? Well, horror has a pretty clear and pretty terrifying answer for that, according to another major thinker in this space. Enter Barbara Creed. In 1993, she totally flipped the script. She looked at horror and said, wait a minute, women aren't just victims. She argued that when women do have power in these films, they're almost always shown as monstrous. Why? Because they represent what society is afraid of.
She called this the monstrous feminine. And the idea is that all these deep-seated cultural fears about the female experience, things like pregnancy, biology, sexuality, get projected onto these female monsters. So the female body itself becomes the site of the horror. It's the thing we're supposed to be scared of.
And she laid out all these archetypes where you see this happen. We're talking about everything from the archaic mother, think the alien queen, all the way to the possessed girl or the witch. All of these figures are basically manifestations of society's fear of powerful women, of things it just can't control. The perfect example? Just think about the movie Alien. The horror in that film isn't just some generic monster, right? It's all tied up in this absolutely terrifying version of pregnancy and birth. You've got the eggs, the facehugger, the chest burster. It's a total perversion of motherhood. That's a textbook example of Creed's monstrous womb and archaic mother concepts in action.
So, for a long, long time, those were the main choices on the menu. Passive object or terrifying monster, but things are changing. There's a new subgenre in fiction that's not just breaking the rules, it's completely shredding the rulebook.
Let me introduce you to Femgore. It's a literary movement, and it's incredible. It takes all that body horror from the monstrous feminine and completely reclaims it. So instead of her body being the source of fear for others, the main character uses it. She wields it. Femgore is all about weaponizing the female body and staring into the abyss of womanhood without blinking.
And the shift in perspective is absolutely key here. In Femgore stories, women aren't just trying to survive some horror that's happening to them. No way. They're the ones causing the horror. They're telling their own stories. And yeah, those stories are often pretty bloody.
So this gives us a brand new type of hero, or maybe anti-hero. And she is the polar opposite of horror's most famous good girl, the final girl. You know the final girl, right? She's smart, she's usually morally pure, and she's the one who makes it to the end credits of the slasher flick. Well, Femgore basically says goodbye to her and hello to someone who is messy, morally gray, and unapologetically violent. She isn't just fighting some guy in a mask. A lot of the time, the violence is coming from inside her own head. This new heroine really messes with our whole idea of what it means to be a survivor. She's not a perfect victim. She's definitely not a perfect hero. She lives in that really uncomfortable gray area, somewhere between survivor and perpetrator. So you gotta ask, what's behind all this? What's fueling this bloody and, let's be honest, cathartic new trend in storytelling? Why now?
Well, Femgore is really built on a few core pillars. It takes all these internal, often invisible female experiences and drags them out into the light as full-blown, visceral horror. It's about taking something like rage or the anxieties of motherhood and literally giving it teeth and claws.
And you can't separate its rise from what's happening in the world right now. I mean, those old fears that created the monstrous feminine, they haven't exactly vanished. So in a post-#MeToo era, Femgore basically grabs that monstrous label and puts it on like a suit of armor. It becomes this fictional space to process some very, very real anger.
One publisher put it so well. She said, this kind of fiction is where you find the anger of women that doesn't make it into the history books. It's like an archive of a very specific kind of rage, one that's written in, well, blood and bone.
So let's recap. We've traced this incredible path, from the passive woman who's just there to be looked at, to the terrifying monstrous feminine, and now to the raw, unfiltered rage of the Femgore protagonist. The evolution is just wow. But it leaves us with one big question to chew on. Is this new, bloody face of horror just a cathartic release, or is it a warning? What happens when the people who are only ever supposed to scream are finally the ones holding the knife?